Hello everyone, welcome to my tutorial. Today's tutorial I'm going to talk about database connectivity. In the last session we manipulated data using the collection framework and we used list. But in this tutorial I'm going to show you that how we are going to have an actual database connection. Now in a web application we know that there are source files or there are the class files, and whenever those source files are going to connect to a database, let's say in this case the MySQL database, which is a separate entity. So now if you look at over here in this drawing, you can see that we have the total web application. Okay, so we can say that this is our total web app. Over here we have all our, let's say, WAR file, and then we have a database here. So this is one entity and this is another entity. Now how can these two entities can connect to each other? So there comes a connector. And in this case, since we are using the MySQL, so we have to use a MySQL connector. And whenever we are going to have this MySQL connector available in our WAR file or in our Java file, then what will happen is the Java file can read the data from the database. Now what is that connector and how we are going to get it? That is very simple. Let's say we are going to look at our Maven and we have to put a separate dependency, which is this one. And in here we are saying that the artifact ID is MySQL connector Java and the version is 5.1.30. So now whenever we are having the JDBC thing, or that is sometimes called the Java Database Connectivity, it comes along with some components, and the components are like this. The first thing is the driver manager, a class that connects an application to a data source which is specified by a database URL. When this class first attempts to establish a connection, it automatically loads any JDBC 4.0 drivers found within the class path. Okay, so in this case, the URL means that where is the location of our database, and we have to provide some information to that, such as the ID and password. So we'll see that when we are going to look into the actual application. And then we have a connection. So we get the driver manager, we load it, the driver, and then we are connecting to the database. So that is what the connection is about. And then we get the statement. So a statement is the interface used to execute SQL statements against a database. Statements obtained from connection. So we get a connection and then from that we get the statement, and we are going to execute the SQL query using the statement. And then the result set, which is represents a result from a database query, return results as records. So we have to do these things sequentially, and I will show you that how we are going to use these components to connect to a database and run an actual query from the database. Now, the creation of the connection is very costly. That means whenever you are going to create a connection, it needs some network requirements, and that is going to take some resources, which is not very good if like we are going to have a very big e-commerce site where every time people are connecting to the database. So that means we have to be very careful about handling it. So there are some best practices regarding the JDBC, and these are, one is called the prepared statement, used for precompiled SQL statements. Precompiled makes it faster, also secured against SQL injection. So we'll talk about the SQL injection. What is that? It's a type of a threat that the hackers can use if we are not using the proper SQL statements in our application. Then the connection pool. Connection is costly in terms of resources. Connection pool caches connections and make these reusable when one connection is closed. And then the batch statement, use batch updates whenever possible. and always close connection and statements in finally block. Okay, so the connection pool, as I said before, that creating the connection is very costly. So we need to create a pool of connections, and we can use the connections from that pool. And then the batch statement, rather than saving one by one, it is better to use a batch statement where we can save or update a bulk of statements. And then always close connection, because if we are not closing the connections, so that means the connection is going to be in the system as long as it is not destroyed. Okay, let's move on to collection pool, and we can have our own connection pool created, but there are plenty of already connection pools that can be used. DBCP is the one that can be used, and later on I just showed that how we are going to use the basic DBCP. So now let's look into the connection pool again. Okay, so in this case, what happens whenever we are going to create an application, or whenever we are going to start the application. So this is our DB, and this is something we are calling the connection pool. So let's say this is connection 1, connection 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so we have created the pool. So this is the pool with 5 connections. Okay, and whenever the web application starts, this pool started. So the pool started app started. Okay, all right, now this is our request. So let's say we have a request 1, and request 1 is getting from this pool. So this one is like no connection created. No connection created. Why? Because we already have created the connection pool, okay, whenever the application started, and this is our connection 1, and the request 1 is taking connection 1. So we can have request 2, and request 2 is getting the connection from connection 2, and again no connection is created. Now whenever request 1 is done, and the new, let's say we have 3, 4, and 5 requests, and whenever, let's say, there is a request number 6, and what is happening is by that time request number 1 is done. Okay, so whenever the request number 1 is done, this is freed. So this is free. So now request number 6 will try to get this connection. This is what the purpose of the connection pool, that we have a bunch of connections, and the requests are coming to the pool, taking the connection from the pool, and we don't need to create any connection. So that's how the connection is created. And as I said before, that there are already connection pools, or there are already applications that are ready-made. So we do not need to create our own connection pool. We can just use the already created one, such as the DBCP. Okay, so that's all for today's tutorial. Thank you.